Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Michael Noland here, and man, I am excited for tonight's video. And of course, tonight I'm reviewing and giving my thoughts on the album Led Zeppelin 3. Now, this album is one of my favorite Led Zeppelin albums out of all of them, each being a classic, by the way. This band didn't put out a couple of near-miss albums ever. The closest thing to a near-miss may be the album they put out after John Bonham's death, Coda. But you know, with the release of that album, I can't even imagine it not existing within the Led Zeppelin canon. The very first thing I want to say about this album is its overall character, the overall listening experience when you listen to this album. Only one aspect being the very tidbits and pieces that you hear on the album of false starts, count-ins, scraping of guitar strings in between well-chosen notes, and the snicks and the snacks that you hear with Jimmy Page's guitar on this album. Well, you just know at the end of a good listening to this album, this is a piece of art. You know, I've always enjoyed albums with little tidbits, whether it's the sound of a tape recorder being recorded as it is clicked in to fast rewind or just studio chatter. I love albums that include this. And you know I'm a fan of the Beatles, and of course they achieved this to a degree with their album Let It Be. But you know, the only album that even comes close to that overall sound that Led Zeppelin creates on Led Zeppelin 3, to me, would be one of my favorite female singer-songwriters of all time, Sheryl Crow, and her magnificent album, The Globe Sessions. But it's not just the recording techniques that Led Zeppelin use on this album that sets it apart. For the first time in their career, Led Zeppelin actually takes time off. Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, meeting up at a cabin named Bron-Y-Aur to write songs. Here, they had time to absorb the feel of nature, of the country, even going on walks together, with Jimmy Page stopping the walk immediately because Robert Plant came up with a very nice idea that would fit into a song. Meanwhile, while Jimmy Page and Robert Plant are at Bron-Y-Aur writing material, John Paul Jones is at home and has been writing some material himself. Of course, it's after their stay at Bron-Y-Aur that Page and Plant meet up with Jones and Bonham at Headley Grange, a home closer in size to a small castle. This structure is 4 stories high with a basement that is as wide and as long as the entire house itself. Led Zeppelin not only used this as their recording studio, with the Rolling Stones' famous mobile recording studio just outside, the band uses the entire house as an instrument. Drums don't sound right? Moving mics not fixing it? Let's move them out into the hallway. Too much echo? Let's throw up a mattress. Don't feel like getting up at 9 o'clock in the morning to hit the studio? That's okay. Sleep in. Start at midnight. Record until it feels right. Get some rest. Then start the whole process again. The whole band living not only together, but all 4 members focused intently on a brand new project. Whenever Led Zeppelin chose to take this path, we were always assured of a superior product every single time. Now, I do want to bring up something here. I always look for tidbits of information to supply you guys with for my videos, things that I don't quite remember but would be interesting for you guys to know. Often me learning in the process right along with you guys. And as much as I hate to do it, I do take a look at Wikipedia. That's right, Wikipedia. The most evil resource on the internet, if you ask me. Talk about hidden agendas, I don't even want to go there. Now, here's an example of why I call it Wikipedia. You see, according to them, this album got mixed reviews. Yet their very cited resources tell you the worst review it got was 3.5 stars out of 5. That's a 7 out of 10, folks. Okay, and then the next least favorable review it got was a B+, all the rest A's. So Wikipedia, it's bad enough you get your facts wrong, But when you get your facts wrong and then back them up with other facts that tell you you got your facts wrong, it's time to quit the game. Now, it's true, the sales for this album weren't as strong as their first two albums. But it wasn't because of the critics' reviews. That had nothing to do with it. This was quite a departure for Led Zeppelin. Their first two albums basically had this heavy sound, and they experimented within that heavy sound a bit. And each album containing one or two, maybe three hints of where the band might go in the future. Not so with this album, despite the fact that the very first cut sounds exactly like it could have come off of either Led Zeppelin 1 or Led Zeppelin 2. And that, of course, is the magnificent Immigrant Song, a song that Robert said was written in response to Led Zeppelin visiting Greenland, and he had read something about how the Vikings invaded Greenland. Don't believe him for a second. The whole song is about the Northmen from the Misty Mountains, I'm sure. Okay, so all jokes set aside, it's interesting in this song. The very stereo spectrum you hear when you listen to this song on headphones, Jimmy Page intentionally has this stereo field that's almost devoid on the right side. It's not quite, and the way that they bring Robert Plant's vocals into this song, you realize that was a perfect choice. They'll do this on at least one other cut to a different degree, and we'll talk about that later. And so with this track, right away, Led Zeppelin tells us they haven't abandoned past approaches to songwriting. It just wouldn't dominate their sound from this point on. A magnificent cut to open an album with, a great hit for Led Zeppelin, but it does you no favors in regard to what to expect on your first listening of this album. Okay, it's with the next track, friends. You don't get a better track than this from Led Zeppelin at any point in their career. Of course, to maintain the flavor of the album, there's more studio chit-chat and leakage, of course. Bonzo's drums drives the entire track. He's amazing on this. And instead of placing Robert Plant's voice quite as high as it was in Immigrant Song, Jimmy Page wisely brings him into the mix, with John Paul Jones arranging orchestra that is just barely lightly peppered in and disappears almost as quick as you can hear it. The band actually develops a pre-Kashmir sound on this song. Not only is it a superior track on its own, but it manages to melt into the next track, and you almost have to take these two tracks together. You know, it's with the Celebration Day half of these two songs presented on the album that we hear Led Zeppelin's first use of Moog synthesizer, provided of course by John Paul Jones. But it's the beats that John Bonham supplies and the riffs that Jimmy Page explores that almost sound like a lot of the stuff they recorded 2 albums later, Houses of the Holy. When taken together, these two tracks tell you you're not listening to the Led Zeppelin your older brother told you about. All right, next up, the magnificent Since I've Been Loving You. An excellent example of John Bonham driving an entire Led Zeppelin song. He's the engine here. And of course, this time Led Zeppelin is not shy about bringing Robert Plant's voice right up in the mix. After all, how else would we clearly understand that life can sometimes be a drag. And you know, it's interesting here. Jimmy Page's solo. Now, we've talked about in the past that he uses the stereo spectrum very well, often in a way that highlights his guitar playing in very specific ways, but never quite recorded like you'd hear your average rock band with solo, dead center, right up front, right between the eyes. Not so on this song. Man, he is dead center in the stereo spectrum, and this is one of his very finest solos. He wants you to hear it. He even chooses a slightly abrasive tone here. And then, arriving rather late in the mix, John Paul Jones at 4 minutes and 57 seconds enters into the picture with his organ. Then the song goes to one of the most magnificent slowdowns of tempos for a song to end. Not only a great track, but you know what? a Led Zeppelin classic track, no doubt. Next up, Out on the Tiles, a great riff song, and all of the riffs for this song were developed by John Paul Jones. Now it's interesting, remember some of the riff songs from the mid-60s? Ticket to Ride, Satisfaction, all of them beginning with the root note and then messing with the minor pentatonic scale to develop that riff, right? But always starting with the root note. Here, John Paul Jones develops a riff that descends to the root note. From the very first riff note, you don't know exactly where Led Zeppelin is going with this song. They don't reveal even the key. We have no idea at first listening how many whole and half steps they need to take just to establish the root. That was quite a bold choice in 1970, and kudos to John Paul Jones on this track. Next up, Gallows Pole. Again with some studio leakage, something sounding like somebody flicking a cigarette lighter or flicking on an amp. Again, another excellent example of how John Bonham drives the song, and even a more fully realized separation between two of Jimmy Page's guitars. And Jimmy Page, as a general guitarist, is in top form on this song. But you know who shines? John Paul Jones. My God, the man's all over the place. His footprints are everywhere on this song. Another excellent track where all four are making major decisions regarding what you're hearing. Tangerine by Jimmy Page, a song written for the Yardbirds. Wonderful, almost country western riffing here, yet somehow sounding not a bit like country and western music. He achieves this several times on this album, and he also deliberately sounds country and western at least once on this album, and we'll discuss that. Now, of course, the song starts off with a false start, again giving you the sense that you're right there in the studio as you're listening to the band. And at 1 minute and 40 seconds, that's where you really need to listen to the effect of Jimmy Page's magnificent and well-placed riffs in this song. Of course, with That's the Way, in come more country-flavored riffs sounding not a bit like a country and western tune. And of course, the band takes their inspiration from one of the greats, Shakespeare. The song is about two people being in love and dealing with all of the crap their families are giving them because they shouldn't be together. Sound familiar, Romeo? How about you, Juliet? Here we see Robert Plant brought right up front in the mix, as he should be on this song, and Jimmy Page just stacking guitar sound after guitar sound after guitar sound. Okay, so next up is my favorite track on the album, and let me tell you why. Now, I was born in North Carolina, raised primarily in California, but in 1972, I attended Tuscola High School, Waynesville, North Carolina. I lived there for a year with my grandmother, who secretly moonshined off to the side and had a still, and spent a whole lot of time with my Uncle Homer. And I remember he was just getting interested in music. Now, my father had already been a musician, singer-songwriter, and all of that. I didn't know Homer had an interest in music, but he liked bluegrass music. I saw him jam, and I saw him have musicians over who jammed at his house. Alls I can say, Bron-Y-Aur stomp comes right out of the Appalachian Mountains, or at least out of the Great Smokies. Here, the band sounds so American you can't believe that they're a British band. John Bonham's driving, stomping beat, him playing spoons? No, I'm telling you, I come from this part of the country. I've spent time in this part of the country. I'm telling you, in my humble opinion, this is authentic Americana music. Every single time I hear the song, I want to get up and dance. So give it a listen, take a swig off your grandma's jug, grab a partner, because Led Zeppelin's the live band at this hoedown. Now, on the last song of the album, Robert Plant's voice was evidently recorded through a Supra tremolo amp. And you know, I can believe it. My only criticism to this song is not the effect. I like the tremolo effect of Robert's voice here. It's just that, like all vocals recorded through any amp, you're gonna get overtones, and I hear them and I just can't unhear them. I've even heard some negative criticisms about this song. Don't get me wrong, I am not negatively criticizing this song. This song was well chosen to end the album as an artistic statement. Don't forget, Led Zeppelin had 16 songs recorded that they could use for this 10-song album, and they chose this one instead of 6 others to end the album. There is an artistic statement being made with this song. With Jimmy Page's guitar dragging lines, this song has a real down-home feel. And no doubt there is a hominess feel to this album. And thanks to their whole approach, you feel like you were there with Led Zeppelin as they recorded this album. And it is one of my very favorite Led Zeppelin albums of all time. All right, so that about covers it for tonight. I said I'd give some final thoughts on this album, and I'm about to do that. If you see names down here, these are all brand new subscribers, and it's my way of giving them a shout out and a thank you for joining the tribe. Of course, you can do so too. You just hit that subscribe to the tribe button, hit that top bell notification, and you'll be notified of all future videos. I want to give a quick shout out once again to Royce in the House. Excellent channel. I've told you before, he's a wonderful storyteller, but lately he's been teaming up with Lou Mars, a drummer who knows a lot about his trade. Of course, an even bigger shout out to all of our viewers. You know what I feel about you. It's only through you sharing our videos that these subscribers have found the channel. So whether you've subscribed yet or not, you just kind of occasionally come into view, we appreciate each and every one of you. I read each and every comment, and I gotta tell you, some of our newer subscribers are very knowledgeable, and I've already learned a lot through the comments on my own channel. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Finally, I just want to say about this album, there is such a wonderful organic feel to this album. I see it as a work of art, not just a classic album. It should be listened to as if it is a work of art. Trust me. Put your headphones on, listen to this album from beginning to end. Place yourself in an environment where you will not be interrupted for the next 44 minutes. And just like you would read a good book or look at a painting in a museum, it's all there for you. Okay, so that's about it for the video tonight. Of course, I'm Michael Noland. The channel's name is The Bottom Line. And of course, I'll see you in the next video.